it's now setting up a Zoom call or a phone call to ask something that might take 3 seconds, where you could just tap someone on the shoulder 3 desks across. I always thought that was going to be a wee bit weird at the start, but it hasn't been too bad from the feedback we've heard so far. But yeah, we'll all be interested in the next sort of 6 to 12 months to see what happens.
Yeah. But what's fascinating for me is, I've been talking about the power of onboarding and the importance, because I think sometimes, the recruitment process itself is quite challenging, right? And it's a lot of hard work put in. And sometimes organizations don't really focus so much as they should do on onboarding. And I think where we are with the pandemic and the need for, for having the remote teams and remote recruiting going on, onboarding has become a really big part. So hopefully by getting that right, and as you said, I think there'll be, whilst that conversation doesn't kind of happen with those little bits of chats that you can have over something, they'll take a couple of minutes to get an answer for.
Yeah.
The fact that if you get your onboarding right, then actually that means that, those questions are covered in more detail. So that person actually has much more information around what they need to do, where the reporting lines are coming into place. So I think, it's to
Absolutely.
me, it's been really exciting. I think it's quite exciting to sort of see.
I think what we've seen is a bit of a softer touch in the recruitment process of maybe a casual chat first and making that introduction, getting to know the candidate, getting to know the client as well. It's not typically a straight into a formal technical test. I'm looking for a job type scenario. It's is there a chemistry mix here, and then it like that opens up the communication lines for whenever it is a simple question, and it doesn't need to be so heavily formalized with a Zoom call or an email or something like that. Because obviously it's hard to judge tone off emails, and there's hard to build that personal relationship as well. So definitely. It was huge. Speaking of what Claire had said, huge learning curve for us as recruiters, and I'm sure companies as well in the onboarding process at the start, but slowly but surely getting there.
I think the good thing about this is that it's opening people's eyes to different ways of doing things, and that's kind of the key thing, is that there's kind of the typical traditional. And then there's, we're kind of thrust into this environment where we have to do something different. And then it's kind of like, supermarkets have had to adjust with the automation of the till systems. And, you've got all these different industries who have had to completely change the way that they do stuff. And I think actually it just broadens people's minds a lot more into, what could be or what they could do, or making them think outside the box a wee bit.
Absolutely.
I guess that's one of the big reasons why we want to pull this together. So give you a bit of background. Obviously, Ray's works with a lot of early stage tech companies. They're primarily either one or two founders. They go out, they build a product, and then they try and sell it. They get their first customers and they look for investment. And I know that I've got some companies on here that have either got investment or are going for investment. And then the next big step for them is to do the recruitment piece. And quite often the first hire is maybe a salesperson, or it can be to customer support, or it's into product development. And the big question we're hearing is what talent is out there, and how do we bring them and attract them to our startups versus maybe some of the bigger guys in town. And I really just kind of wanted to bring this together to kind of have an open panel, to have a really good chat across the board and find out what's happening out there, and open up kind of the marketplace to make it easier to understand what talent's out there, and hear other people's experiences as well. So we've brought into a couple of key speakers tonight, so thank you everybody for putting your time together for tonight. We have Chris Laughlin from Rapid7. We have Chris Jones, I think, is joined as well from VML, and we brought them on more from their slightly later stage, bigger companies that have experience in recruiting, specifically in the tech sector. So we'll be chatting to them about their experiences. We've also got some recruitment guys on the call, with Claire from Recruit IT and Andrew and Marty from VANRATH, particularly talking about what is in the marketplace and what their experiences are, and you've heard some of that already. But I also wanted to layer onto that the technology piece. So we've got Gufa and Stephen, Gufa from ScaleUpForGrowth and Stephen from UpSkill, who are both working on platforms that help the recruitment industry in terms of talent management, culture fit and recruitment. And I just think that's really interesting, of how recruitment's being kind of digitized and transformed as well. So we'll hear from them later on. So again, thank you everybody for joining tonight. We'll kick off with a couple of questions. And if you have any other questions, please do drop them into the chat, and if there are any particular speakers, or just throw it out there and I'm sure somebody will answer it. So, back to the start of, what is, recruiting like out there, going to the big corporates with the likes of Chris and Chris. Tell us a wee bit about your experience of hiring, recently or over the last couple of years. Are you seeing a big demand for developers? How does the marketplace look from your side of things? Chris Jones, you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. So I'd probably like to say as well, us as VML Technology, we're a hell of a lot smaller than Rapid7. So we're around 26 people, but of course have had that growth phase in the last couple of years from 5 or 6 people up to 26 at the minute. So we have, of course, seen lots of issues with recruitment, and there is, in terms of the market, there are definitely engineers and very good engineers out there. And I would say, as a startup, if you're looking to recruit, you do need to take your time, and interviewing is very time consuming, but a wrong hire can really set you back. And we've definitely been burnt with that in the past a few times. So we've had to create more rigorous processes around our interview and initial onboarding, and really making use of that 6-month probation period and being able to make those difficult decisions to say, actually, this isn't working out for us. And I'm sure the other Chris has more experience in terms of like Rapid7, building out their recruitment processes and protocols, especially as you scale around that. But what I would say from a startup's perspective and from our perspective, it's really hard to organically recruit. This isn't anything against recruiters at all, but they've got the market. They know how to outreach to people incredibly well. They have the talent pool there, and it's very hard for a company like ourselves who don't have massive marketing budgets in terms of outreach for engineers to be able to organically recruit. So you do have to utilize the recruitment companies out there and get the best from them, because they do know what they're doing, and they do know, and they do have that good talent pool. But on the flip side, they can be very expensive, especially if you're hiring 10 engineers. You could be talking around 50, 60K in fees of recruitment side there. So just being aware of that as you're scaling. And then as well, of course, probably finally, is in terms of recruitment and building a team, Belfast is incredibly saturated with tech companies, which is incredible because that will upskill engineers across all levels and create a really great tech community. But it can be hard to find people that will jump from the likes of a Kainos, a Citibank, a Liberty, and those big stable jobs that pay well and are very stable and compared to potentially a startup. But it's about the founders and the early tech team being able to give a compelling story and be able to evangelize and inspire people to want to come along, and especially in the early stage, and join their startup journey. So I think as a founder or early employee, being able to tell that story of what problem you're trying to solve and inspire people to come and join the team, setting out that sort of vision when you're recruiting at an early stage is incredibly important in terms of getting top engineers interested and to want to come on board.
There's some really good tips there in terms of selling the journey of the startup, and leaning into Rapid7, and also you scale significantly up to the 250, and you're even talking earlier, Chris, about going up to 300 and 350. What is it that you're looking for in developers? We know we have some talent coming out of university, but we know the universities don't have maybe enough developers coming out. How do you find these developers, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge at the minute. Like, what we have in the existing talent pool are really great developers who are working for really great companies, and it's really hard to pull them out of that company. You need to have that wow factor to drag them across. Like when I joined Rapid7, talking near 6 years ago, there was only 40 of us. I was replacing someone who was leaving, so I was the sole UI developer working for the company. Within the first week, the CEO flew over from Boston to meet everyone. We had a party in the Grand Opera House. It was great fun. Like, it was so weird having this interaction with that, the person who controlled the company. So it felt so personal, felt so small, even though we had like a couple of hundred people in America. That was a kind of the focus of driving and building Belfast. Is like, this is a place we want to invest. This is where things are going to be amazing. And it, like, kind of echoing some of the points that Chris was talking about, pulling the people out of the traditional financial companies like Citigroup and Liberty, you know, these conglomerates that, you know, a lot of people don't want to work for the corporate place where you have to wear business casual every day. We had a pool table and Nerf darts and all that kind of stuff and going around the office. So making somewhere fun, engaging, and excitable, where you're going to be doing cool work, making an impact, is going to pull them more than going, well, I can go to City, and hopefully no one from City's on this call before I bandwidth them enough. Go somewhere where, you know, it's going to be a little bit boring but more stable. There's always that risk factor in a startup, and it's trying to like outweigh that risk factor. Like as we've grown, like we were always trying to pull in like the highest talent, and it's almost like we've dug ourselves in a little bit of a hole where like people who work for Rapid7, not bragging at all, like they're, you know, the best talent, you know, in Belfast, you know, the cream of the creme, myself included, obviously, you know, jokes. But we've now got this position where, you know, the people we bring in always have to be amazing talent. And Rapid7 are always focused about bringing in placement students, training them up, bringing them back as graduates, and having that, you know, cycle coming out of the university. So we worked closely with the university. We went on site, you know, gave lectures to kind of explain what we do, what makes us different, why would you want to work for us compared to someone else, you know, giving them that option that they might not know of this small startup business or this, you know, company that is, you know, working out of a tiny rented office somewhere, giving them that knowledge, engage with them, give them the option. Chances are they're going to go for something that's cool and hip nowadays because everyone wants to do something different. Bring them in. They may not be the amazing talent right now, but if you train them and grow them into your culture and the tech that you use, you can then have an amazing person who's going to build and, you know, grow your company even better. Then they bring in that extra talent. So having really good people will attract other really good people. And I think we're getting the point now where like our like internal recruitment team are heavily, you know, heavily leaning on the developers to say, you know, if I'm a recruiter and I contact you, another developer in LinkedIn, they're not going to reply. They're not going to accept my invite. But if you're a developer and you contact them, or if you're sharing your story, if you're saying this is a great place to work, that's the engagement someone's going to go to. Like I'm not actively looking, but if I was going to go look for a job, I don't think I would go to a traditional job site. I think I would look at companies and see what people are talking about, you know, go on the likes of Twitter and stuff like that to see who's engaging with the community, who's doing something cool and exciting, because chances are I'm going to enjoy what they're doing. Like against the traditional, you know, going to NI Job Finder and filtering for tech or whatever. You know, the market has really changed from that kind of perspective.
And it's interesting, you know, the buyers out there who are the job seekers are really, you know, they're not spoiled for choice, but, you know, if they've got good talent and they've got good expertise, it's great to see that there's lots of choice out for them. So you're right, you do have to stand out from the crowd. And I guess, you know, the role of the recruiter does play a part in that. You know, we've got VANRATH, we've got Real Time on the call as Andrew and Marty, so you can share this question between you. But it is not just thinking about developers, but also we talk to you guys about the sales talent as well out there. You know, what are you seeing out in the marketplace from maybe developers or maybe sales? And Claire, you can link into this as well. Do you want to give us a couple of lines?
Yeah, sure. I would say definitely echoing what Chris and Chris are saying. The talent is definitely there, but they're typically in something already. Invest and I's done a great job of attracting inward investment, and Rapid7 included. And it obviously got there before a lot of companies, but we've had a couple of things come through the last 2 years that are looking for the crème de la crème. They're looking for the best, and how do they dig those people out of the jobs? They've either got to do something cool and do something interesting like a greenfield rewrite, or offer good on the salary side, or a combination of all three. So then that falls to us to dig those people out and get the sales pitch or the value proposition for them across. So it is truly the days of Chris looking at NI job finders or people looking at the Belfast Telegraph for a job are dead. It doesn't often happen. And speaking from personal experience, I'm sure, because Claire does stuff in the software space as well, could probably echo this. I could probably show you on two hands the amount of people that have actually applied for jobs that I've posted in the last year and a half. It's typically referrals through friends, or people get a bit of a reputational view and will get in contact, or sort of people just sort of not they'll almost like loosely look around. I'm not really active right now type conversation, but if X comes down the line, get in touch with me. They're typically the placements that I would make in the software space. So it's tough. So what is the sales pitch? And distilling that for individuals and what they're going to come across to do. Rapid7, obviously globally renowned for their work in the cybersecurity space. Would you want to work for them? Absolutely. If you're a UX, UI, JavaScript developer, Java developer, it's a fantastic brand to have on the CV. But the reality is turnover in the market's probably every 2 to 3 years anyway, which I'm sure like Chris has probably seen as well. So there's always going to be a constant challenge in that space. So that's just sort of a top-down overview. The talent's definitely there. It's not people embedded in Citibank or sort of insert brand here that everybody probably knows that I don't want to mention just yet. But nothing's really legacy fintech type systems anymore, or that's few and far between at this point in time. The market's saturated with options, and those options are looking for the exact same candidate. So it can be quite difficult.
And I know, Claire, we've talked about this a wee bit in terms of outside the developers, kind of the sales roles, the finance roles, the customer support roles. If there's not the talent there because the ecosystem isn't progressed enough, can we start thinking about cross-selling different talent into these markets? I know we talked about, for example, finance and sales, that type of thing. How do we attract them in if they aren't maybe experts in those fields, thinking about their other skills, that type of thing?
Yeah, well, look, I think we've shown that, people can cross-train really well, and, and I think it's really essential actually at the moment in the market, and people, are going back and maybe doing the masters, or they're just getting into a company and cross-training internally. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We have smart people. We have, universities pumping out good people, and the brain drain isn't, such a big thing these days. People do stay here, it's a good place to live and work. And so if people haven't maybe chosen the right degree, and maybe gone down a different path, there's still plenty of opportunity right now for people to cross train. So I do think, that's going to happen more and more. But some of those opportunities at the sales roles you're talking about, there's a very developed market for, SaaS salespeople in Dublin, for example. The companies have come in and they've set up there, like, Facebook, Google, Workday, all of that, the big companies. And we haven't necessarily had that here. So I think that's something that we will see grow, because I think it's a little bit saturated in Dublin, and we're starting to even see companies considering fully remote SaaS salespeople from here to work for those companies. So I think we're going to see growth in that area as well, and that should help hopefully the tech startups who want to bring in an initial salesperson. There'll be a bigger pool here as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting, obviously, from the recruitment side of things, one of the questions we often get from our startups is, should they be posting the salary out there? Because obviously it's hard to compete. We have a question there from Jace in regards to, can they compete with the big salaries of the FDIs? Are the FDIs, they are obviously able to pay that, but are they doing it on purpose so that they keep people? There's lots of questions around the salary. Guys from VANRATH, do you have any questions on whether or not, or any theories on whether or not startups should post their salaries?
Yeah, I would say very bluntly, yes. And the pure reason is, can they compete with FDIs? Absolutely not. And that's just the reality of it. But you've got to tailor your sales pitch to your strength. So I think clearly defining the path of the startup. Is this going to be developed into something where it's a lifestyle business and we all have a really nice job and we work 4 days a week and we've got nice cars and whatever, and all our bills and stuff, or our expenses are paid for, and it's a nice business? Or is this being built for a sale? Is this a liquidity event, and are we going to cash out on it? So in which case you would obviously offer equity and try and get buy-in that way. But making sure you're getting the right people on board at the start is crucial, because if you get somebody in, as I'm sure the other Chris had touched on, you get somebody in that's not going to work and you end up having to move them on inside 6 months. There's an emotional cost, a financial cost, and then potentially having to go out to find a recruiter there. So I would say, yes, you need to have that advertised, because not everybody can afford to give their time away for free. Not everybody's going to want to interview or progress down a sort of prospect or a job if it's not for them longer term. So I think the painful reality is, yes, you need to make it clear what you can pay or what you can offer, and make sure everybody knows what the business direction is internally before you recruit for another partner, another employee, and what can you ultimately offer them, and are they bought into the dream, if you excuse the cliche. But yeah, I would say yes, we should be advertising that.
Jenny, I'll jump in there just on top of Andrew. I'm a bit more biased, I think, on the sales or the commercial side. I don't really like to advertise money as much because I don't want candidates just looking at money, and it should never be a money motivated move in the first place. I think if, as Andrew was saying, as Chris was talking about, the vision, if the candidate is bought into your vision, coming from, I recruited for Citibank before internally, so stripping it back, I've worked internally in one of those big companies, and VANRATH a lot smaller than that. I get more value and more satisfaction of working for a small company and being a bigger piece of that team than I do, as a number in a large business. And again, no disrespect to Citibank or other large businesses like that, but candidates in the market aren't necessarily just motivated by a salary these days, or monetary value or great benefits or a pool table, etc. They want to be part of something, and it's like anything. And if you look at sport as well, players want to be a big player in a team. They don't necessarily just want to be a bit part player, So I would disagree on the sales side, because there's nothing worse than a salesperson who's just about the money. If you can write a job description that's a bit more intriguing and a bit more engaging, and that person's bought into your vision and what you're doing, you're on to a winner. That's the priority you need to do with any hire into the business for me.
So I find this interesting. I'm part of like a local Slack community. It's like the NI Dev Slack community.
Yeah.
There's a jobs channel on there, and without fail, if someone posts a job and there's no salary band or indication what salary could be, it's immediately flagged, and people are asking like, can there be a salary put on this? Like I myself, like, I'm going to lean towards something that's more interesting, but I've worked in the industry for a while. I'm not sure what a junior is going to be looking for, but it seems to be other people are like, they're questioning like, what is the salary? And the one complaint I've seen was people were like, well, I don't want to go through interviews to get to the end and it's a salary that's lower than mine. I was like, well, I'm assuming you would have met with someone at some point to have a communication about what the pay expectations are, but some people seem to value having a salary range on the job title as important. I don't, but it's this weird and like thing in the market at the minute.
I think you could argue back and forth, definitely. As I said, like Andrew and I work in the same business, and he firmly believes on one side and I firmly believe the other. But I think it depends on the candidate you have and the market, the audience you're going after. But that's a very, very valid point. Somebody at some point needs to understand the talent and the value of the talent before the candidate and the employer invest a lot of time going through the process. And I think as a recruiter, it's always our job when we submit candidates, we always give the client a feel for, look, this is their expectations, this is why they're leaving. Those things are so important to understand. Otherwise, as you said, you could get down the rabbit hole with someone and waste their time, waste yours. And that's doing the opposite of what you're trying to do. If you're saying that you don't have the budget and the recruitment spend and the marketing budget to go out and talk about how great your brand is, geez, that's the last thing you want to do, is waste someone's time and have them go and tell a peer who could be great as well that these X company wasted my time, so don't go near them.
I think sort of circling back around it on my own point, if it comes down to a salary conversation, if someone's going for a startup in the cybersecurity space and the options are go to the startup or go to Rapid7, if they're valuable to the startup, they're probably going to be valuable to Rapid7 as well. So using that example, if it's a salary conversation, even for me and Marty, I'm sure speaking to candidates, you'll try and take salary out of it entirely. I would try and focus on what's a career move, because if they'll move for 5K extra because they had a bad conversation with their manager or they're just a wee bit pissed off, they'll move for 5K again in a year's time or 2 years' time. So it wastes everybody's time. You've put time into training them, and they've got mixed into the company culture and all the rest of it, and everybody sort of feels a bit sore afterwards. So on the startup side, I would say definitely you need to make it clear what you can pay, whether that's benefits, equity, whatever. Everybody's bought in the vision. The vision's very clear. But regardless, you should be putting the salary. Can you compete with an FDI? I would say, given the fact that Invest and I are probably back in most of their salaries, and they would typically have a lot of cash to want to set up a new office or a new satellite office in Belfast, you're never going to win. So distilling what your value proposition is more important, and it can't come down to salary, because 5k here or there, 10k here or there isn't going to work, because when the next show rolls into town and someone's looking around for the best C#.net developers or best Java developers, they're always going to have 10k more than you, because cash flow and sort of reserves in that regard in a startup are much more important to focus on growth activities or revenue generating activities, rather than paying recruiters or paying to get somebody else in because you couldn't hold on to somebody. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that regard, because the market's very fertile. It's very competitive for finding candidates, but at the same time, candidates can come and go, and you need to make sure someone's bought in the vision. If you're going to hold on to the long term, they need to be bought in for something else other than just salary.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll just back that up. From my perspective, I think when you're looking at if you're looking for that talent war that's happening with, say developers or people that have post 5 years experience, etc., that market's extremely tight. Yep. And so you're always going to have the salary is going to need to be demonstrated, because, that group know what their market value is. I think, talking to some organizations, the smart organizations are kind of looking at talent recruitment, and maybe as startups, we need to look at it that way, is this starts to become a medium to long-term plan. So, if you look at anything that's happening if you want to use sport as an analogy, if you can develop your own, you're more likely to, have the type of people that you can retain in your organization that can help you develop that culture. And if instead of having this kind of battle where you've got 5 or 6 senior developers and everyone's whacking 10 grand on top of that, is actually thinking, well, how long will it take us to develop our own? And there's so many exciting ways to do that. And I know we talked a lot about what we can do in the graduate space, but there's a huge opportunity for organizations, especially if you're a startup, start engaging with young people at A levels. Because I'm talking to right now where they're kind of going, I don't want to go to uni. Right? I'm looking for, something that, is exciting, something that's different, something that's got purpose, something that's got value. So startups, that, those are the words that we talk about every single day. And yeah, the fear is, how long is it going to take me to bring that person up to speed? What happens if they leave in 5 years' time? Hey, you're worrying about things that are going to happen in 5 years' time. Well, look about it this way. If you take someone on board, you invest the time, the energy, the effort in developing them, the likelihood of them leaving is reduced. And even if they do, what you've got then is you've got someone who for 5 years has been part of your business and has helped you push your business forward. So hopefully you can then afford to compete with the rest of them. So I think for me, the whole talent space is, look, we have a massive challenge. Tech sector as a whole hasn't really been sold into schools and universities for 15, 20 years. It's now coming into play. You have individuals who've managed to identify that, look, we've got a skill set right now. There's organizations that have, the investor backed and all that type of stuff. So they're taking the cream. The aim for us as startups is really, how do we go about developing our own? And that's got to be your focus. And don't be afraid to do that. I think that's where, the kind of the secret sauce is going to be on, is how can I develop my own, have that process. And even from a recruitment perspective, as a startup, look at what you need to do. Where are we going in our business? Where are we in the next 2 years? What does that kind of look like? And then start to work back from there about the kind of talent I need, and start engaging with that talent today. Just like we would, if I'm tracking investors, I kind of know who the investors I want to target when we're pushing for Series A. Well, you should be doing the same thing with your talent pool as well at the same time.
And it's interesting to kind of lean into more of the graduate management and early career stuff. There was a question there earlier from Michael in terms of how long do you think it takes, maybe back to the two Chris's, how long do you think it takes to upskill, from graduate into, junior tech developer and the senior tech developer? What does that investment look like? What's the timelines roughly? Do you have any insights? Chris Jones, or?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it fully depends on the individual. I think people mature differently over time. It's all based on the experiences they have. Actually, it was a talk at NI DevConf about 4 or 5 years ago. A guy, Stephen, was giving a talk about he had 15 years experience on paper, but realistically only really 5 years commercial experience because he was stagnating for so long. So I think it depends what organization a person's in, how fast they're moving, what tech stacks they're using, and are they consistently and constantly learning and pushing on. So to not answer your question, I do think it's a very hard answer to give, but people year on year should always be trying to set goals, strive to achieve them. And I think that's one thing that startups can definitely give versus a larger organization, is that you're thrown in the deep end. You have to wear many hats. You're doing multiple things and you're learning very quickly. On the graduate and kind of initial early learning stages in a career, that actually might be a bit overwhelming for some people. It might not work out, and you might need that kind of more mature company process driven and more mentors to lean on to be able to grow and develop into that more mid-level to senior engineer before you're ready to go into that startup space. But again, I think it all depends on the individual, what time they're willing to put in outside of their startup as well as within, and how much time they have to build on their own personal development and personal goals.
And Chris Loughlin, and I think you answered a wee bit of it in here in the chat. We want to expand a wee bit further. What do you think about kind of the graduate?
I think we've been through a couple of years of internships, like looking at the first years to now, like not a lot of like how many we've actually retained because they've been amazing talent has changed. Like I think it's actually grown year on year, but we had a very high retention rate at the very beginning. And I think for us at the time, because we were so small, and this kind of feeds into the small startup mentality, and very much echoes what Chris was saying. Put a graduate or put someone new or junior into the deep end, let them experience, let them be like, we always use the term you're a real developer. You're not just doing graduate work or placement work or whatever. Our placement students deploy to prod in the first week. They write the same code that everyone else writes. They're guided obviously, but having that in-depth, throwing them in the deep end, let them be the developer that they're going to be in 2 years from now whenever they've finished university, gives them a perfect experience, lets them grow this. And you can only learn by doing. You can't learn by someone saying like, so this is how we do this, and this is how I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. It's more like, you're going to do it, you're going to fail, and then we're going to do it again, because I failed at this when I started on my first day. And building up that confidence, building up that experience, that knowledge. There's a lot of obviously, someone has to have that drive and ambition to do that. But there is a lot of students coming to university. Tech, whenever I was in university compared to tech now in university, you learn the same thing in university, but tech outside of it's changed. People are using tech and doing different things. I was working on Windows XP. Now I'm, students are sitting with high spec gaming machines. So they have the want and desire. Don't give them meaningless tasks, give them something really powerful to do, and they'll jump at the opportunity to do it.
And also a question for Claire here in terms of more about the mature career. People maybe looking to change career later in life. We've seen quite a lot of the postgraduate skills coming out in software development. People maybe looking from industries that aren't doing so well at the moment, possibly like hospitality, looking to change career. How do you see them stepping into these roles?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely easy, stepping from that straight into a tech career. There's usually something that happens in between, like they have an interest, or they maybe do some online free stuff and discover what it is that they really like, I think, before just thinking, I want into tech, because it's so vast, But I would say that a lot of the larger organizations can be quite good in this respect, the cities and the Allstates and the Liberties, where they will be able to give a bit more time to people and sort of bring them into the overall team and sort of see where people best fit, where I think probably for a startup you just don't have the time or resources maybe to do that unless they're coming there with some skills that they've already demonstrated themselves in their own time. It's a big ask, I think, for a startup to maybe upskill someone like that. So my advice to someone wanting the career switch would probably be to start knocking the doors of the larger organizations initially, and potentially to look at some of the free online courses and see what it is that they actually enjoy most, and start sort of pivoting and building a bit of a portfolio and building something that they can show when they start going to interview. And I've seen people coming into, getting jobs just off the back of some Udemy courses and just literally putting on, September 2020 to present, these courses. It doesn't need to be a big, expensive I'm going back to uni and it's going to cost me thousands of pounds. You know, it can just be, you know, you've worked out that you do like that and you've gone at it a bit, and then the company's willing to then, okay, that person's worth investing in.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, just to build on that, I think, I don't know what the situation is in Northern Ireland, but here in England, you know, apprenticeships have become a big thing. So when you look at individuals moving across, so I was working with a venture builder called Blenheim Chalcott, and they've got probably about 10 or 15 companies in their network, and they recognize that, you know, as fintech being the core of the kind of companies that they back, that they had a massive shortage of data analysts, data scientists. And so part and parcel, which they did have already, but they had an apprenticeship arm. So they got the first data scientist apprenticeship approved. And they've actually used that as a way to, you know, bring talent into their organization. They never considered data analysts or data scientists as a route. And what the apprenticeship does is, because, you know, there is that, you know, you're learning as well as you're earning. So what you then have is a structure. So so in terms of how you develop that person, if you're doing a level 7 or a level 4 data scientist, you know that that's going to take, what, 3 years, 36 months. So going back to the question of how long does it take me to get someone to a certain stage, well, you've got 3 years. Within that 3 years is a structure around how much work stuff you can throw at them, how they can go about developing. So they're combining all those type of things. And I think, to me, that's going to be a massive push for organizations, especially as individuals start to look at kind of reskilling and finding out different career paths. The way the funding for apprenticeships is done, the fact that, if you've got a £3 million plus PAYE bill, then you have to pay into an apprenticeship levy pot. So that means that you have to use that levy pot for something. If you're a small business, the fact that 80% of the training is paid for by the government, and you just have to pay the wages as well as 20% training. It's a really exciting way of kind of bringing talent into your organization, whatever size you are at the moment, both internally upskilling those that are in your role, or recruiting talent. And I think for startups and growing organizations, I think there's a really smart piece there of how do we look at utilizing that to kind of bring some exciting talent in.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And bringing in the kind of the upskilling piece. A big part of the challenge that exists at the minute is people struggling to articulate what skills and interests they have, and part of what really excites us is kind of looking beyond the regular resume that people have, and looking at the hidden talents and hidden skills that people have. And a lot of the time companies have a lot of really good resource already residing within their companies. We're talking here about we've been talking a lot about dev staff coming in, but startups, they need a whole kind of a plethora of skills, and that's part of the excitement of people coming into a startup as well, is that you may be brought in as a dev, but you'll be doing a whole lot of other different things. When you look at the skills and experience that people have, and trying to really understand the uncovered, the hidden skills that they have, can help you to then help them or help you as an individual looking for a job to look at where your career pathway is, and to get there and to map that out. The big thing for us is, first of all, asking the question, what does that look like? Does every company, does every startup know the skills and talents that it fully has within the company? And if you haven't asked those questions, then the question would be, how do you know what you're looking for specifically, in terms of where you need to be, in terms of how you map that against your critical objectives? And coming in on the point of the apprenticeships and the graduate programs and things like that exist, it's an incredible way of really exploring new talent and seeing how you can start to mold people into your company, and taking it at a very kind of a low risk in a low risk way. But again, bringing apprentices in, bringing graduates into a startup, you need to be very clear on what it is that you want them to do, or what you want to achieve with that before you engage in that process. And so that's where we would come from, is really starting to understand what it is that you have internally first and foremost, before you then look at what you need to bring in.
I think it's interesting, from a marketing background, and your skill set as a marketeer covers everything from, you know, making the tea to doing presentations to doing design to doing social media to doing project management. You know, if you wrote all those skills down, it could be 2 pages worth, but your job description for a marketing person is maybe only 2 or 3 or 4 points. So trying to kind of pull those out and develop your people internally, obviously it can save a lot of money and can help, you know, progress talent in their personal career, and then can help the company. And then what you're identifying as the gaps then to fill that you really don't have any skills at all, and you're really targeted then in terms of your recruitment. And I guess, you know, some of the work from the digital transformation and the HR space with UpSkill and ScaleUpForGrowth is just that piece of skills matching, but also thinking about the culture piece and trying to match the people that are looking, like we talked about earlier about the job sites, the people are looking that are engaging for cool companies. You know, there's certain people are looking for certain types of roles, and how do you attract those into your company as well? And that comes down to the culture piece. I don't know if you guys, Stephen or Kufa, want to touch on that as well while we're here.
Yeah, I mean, Keith, I know you'll probably be able to go into this in a lot more detail from your side of things, but you know, really and truly, you know, the culture of your company is what is going to attract people in, and really kind of understanding that you need to believe in the power of the people, and everybody, you know, regardless of age, gender, race, sexual orientation, has a set of skills that extend far beyond previous job role titles or what they've done. And, you know, it's important to really help people to recognize and get recognized for the skills and talents that they have. And, you know, what we do is specifically looking at, you know, slamming the door on things like unconscious bias and things like that. But, you know, in terms of culture of the company and you know, it's vitally important. And I know Anne is in the comments at the minute, kind of talking with some of the guys asking questions. But, you know, if you can't get your culture right, you know, you're going to struggle to get people and keep them and retain them. And it is hugely important. I'm going to pass over to a more qualified person to speak about this. Kufa, you go on ahead, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, I've been lucky enough to be in recruitment for 20 years. So I did start on the data from the database of days with Hayes and kind of moved into executive search, etc. And one of the things that was really kind of prominent and the quick thing that I learned is all about culture matching. You know, the fact that I found out that the most of my placements were still in roles today, you know, the placement was made on the fact of just trying to look beyond what that person, yeah, you know, I expect you to have the skills, I expect you to have the know-how. But when I started to kind of subconsciously look at, well, how does that person get on with that kind of organization? How do I see them fitting in that organization? Then that eureka moment kind of started to come into play. And that's my big push of what we try to do with Scale Up. So when we're talking to organizations is, look, you know that, you know, you if you want a dev, they're going to have a certain skill set that you're looking for, but that culture piece is so important. And so therefore, you know, the time that you spend trying to match that as closely as you can, you know, the likelihood of those individuals being retained in that organization, the fact that they'll become your biggest advocates really comes into play. And I think for startups, that's the key point. I don't remember who mentioned it, but they talked about the fact that, you know, as a startup, we can't compete with the salaries and the wages, etc. So what can we compete with? It is us, you know, it's you, the founder, having a real clear vision of what you're trying to build, where you're trying to take your company, and really kind of sell what that culture means and trying to get people to be aligned to that, you know. And it's a hard thing to do, but it's actually the easiest thing to do at the same time in terms of how you go about, you know, setting that up. There's so many different ways and so many different processes that you can do that. But yeah, you know, the culture piece for recruitment. And when I talk to graduates right now, you know, the one thing they're not interested in is the first thing that none of them ask me about, you know, how much is this role going to pay me? The first thing they ask for is, you know, what is the social responsibility of this organization? What's their why? Yeah, why are they in business? You know, and being able to answer that question starts to show you the kind of people that you want to bring in that organization. Being able to live the values. So, you know, as founders, you know, you're close. Everyone can see where you are, everyone can see what you're doing. It's how do I make sure that not only am I kind of talking about an inclusive culture, not only am I talking about diversity, but actually when anybody in my team and anybody in my business needs to look at that and kind of see that this is what's happening out there. So yeah, you know, for startups, that's the driver. Yeah, you know, that's where you kind of create your USPs, have that culture, you know, throw them in the deep end, give them the the kind of the opportunity to be part of something. Hopefully that you see your success coming from there.
And I think it's I guess that relates right back to the very start of the conversation as to where do you go hunting for talent? If you
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
You there, Bern? Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Bernie. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So I have a very quick question, because this is actually something actually happening in our company right now. So we've got this particular person, very hardworking, very very committed, so much so that they've come from large organizations, and the mentality that they've then brought across to us is very competitive, very rich for the juggler, even within the team, whereas we're more all about collaboration and cooperation. But they've come from a very competitive sort of large organization mentality. How do we balance this? How do we rein it in? Because it's a very difficult conversation to have with this person when every single time they don't have their way. It's like it's almost the entire team. How do we create that balance? How do we rein it in? How do we bring about that culture fit in a way that this person is going to be able to not only
That's an interesting question. How do you integrate people from different cultures into your team?
Like, I think it's something that has to be done essentially, in the market. It sounds like it could have been one of the, making sure that the hiring process is identifying people that are going to fit initially. That may not have gone to plan, or somehow, they've come in there and maybe it is, a bit of a culture shock for them and the team. But I've seen scenarios like that where it's fine, it's good to have different views, and it's good to have different personalities, and it can work really well, as long as, it is managed correctly. And I think you don't want to have an absolute team of clones that are just, thinking and doing things the same way. So it's good to have that, but I suppose, as long as it's not, directly, aggressively, upsetting the rest of the team, and I think it just needs to be managed and make sure that people can express their own views and be a little bit different. It's good.
And just building on that, Benny, I don't know. I mean, I think I shared this story with Stephen, but when I grew my first startup and we went from 2 to 40 people, we had the same challenge, right? Because the people that you bring in when you're 10 people as an organization is completely different to when you're number 15, number 20. And it's completely different when you have investors on board, and all of a sudden the drive as an organization changes. So what Claire says, this is the time to balance. So my question to Brendan would be, do we as a team need to probably step up a little bit more, or move a little bit forward to meet this individual and wherever this individual is coming from, and try and see if there's that medium part, because this is part of your business growing. You're going to get people that are going to come in from a different mindset, different culture. They come into your organization. You absolutely have to mold them together. But sometimes, as Claire said, you can't have everybody the same. It becomes extremely boring, and the world wasn't, built in that way. But be prepared. That's what's going to happen. And also don't be afraid to kind of, if you really genuinely feel that the difference is too much, don't be afraid to kind of just go, we'll draw a line under this and we'll go again. Sometimes people can carry the emotion of the recruitment process further on, and I think Chris mentioned that it becomes quite expensive. So there's also there's a brutality and a ruthlessness that you got to have that kind of goes, okay, look, we genuinely can't match this way, so we're going to part ways. But as Claire says, we're going to go back, we're going to look at our hiring process, we're going to understand why and what happened, and then we're going to look at improving that, and then we're going to go forward again.
Yeah, I think the culture side of like acquiring talent is something I wasn't experienced of like years ago, but it's so important now. And like we used to have the term, like, you would have a culture fit interview, and it's no longer kind of fit, because you don't want to have everyone who has the same, culture coming into the one, place you want, a diverse set of people who are going to bring different things to the table, different points of views. And it feeds into like we were like talking about, cross skilling and bringing people in from like a non-technical to a technical background. Like I want to like talk to someone who had never worked in my sector before, because they're going to have a different point of view. They're going to have a different mindset. They're going to open my eyes to something different. And it's, having that culture mix and not necessarily a fit, because you need that diversity across the board. People.
There's good comments coming there from Anne. She's in Texas.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really grateful.
That's brilliant. And there is a global talent pool out there, with Anne that's coming from Texas saying, she enjoys working here with the talent here in Northern Ireland. Good social impact, good culture, and it's about being, attracting talent globally here. We have quite a good kind of mindset, entrepreneurial mindset that is attractive to people from not just the UK but further afield. And there's other questions coming in from David in terms of kind of work trends, part-time, 3-day working, the 4-day working week, and different trends coming from, the global 4-hour working week isn't quite there yet, but how do we view that from a corporate sort of side of things, to being more flexible, being more open to part-time working, that type of thing? What are you seeing, Chris Jones? What are you seeing from that side of things?
I think it all depends at what stage of startups at. If you're very early stage, you might need and have a team of 3 or 4 people. You might be reliant on everyone working at 120% capacity, and that's just the nature of that type of startup. But there is 100% roles there for part-time work, 3-day work, 4-day work. We usually hire placement students one every year and then keep them on over final year, let them work part-time. And it's about, as a company, defining a culture where that can work and having those asynchronous communication channels that are open. And I think COVID has forced everyone to move more into the 100% remote working space, and that will probably live on forever in terms of a hybrid of in the office or whatever companies decide to do. So I definitely think there is a trend, and that will become more and more of a thing, especially with work-life balance. And I also think as a startup, depending on the industry you're in, if you're product or service, but if you're building your own product, and I definitely know from my experience and the culture we tried to breed in VML technology, it's all about what's output, the work that's done. It doesn't matter if people are online from 9 to 5, or if they'd rather work from 11 to 7 or take a few hours break in the middle. That doesn't matter. We can fully function. We can work asynchronously. There will be times when we need to have team-wide catch-up meetings, but it can be very easy to schedule those over Slack as well. So I think as a startup, you need to be able to utilize that flexibility as a perk going forward to offer up to say, okay, we can't quite pay these salaries, but we offer fully flexible hours, fully autonomous, and we allow people to constantly deliver value, but on their own terms.
Yeah, and there's really interesting the question here in terms of kind of, are you looking for skills or attitude, and that sort of flexibility and the attitude piece is coming into play a lot here when we're talking about culture. Chris Loughlin, what do you think about kind of, are you looking for skills? Are you looking for attitude? Are you looking for both? What are you looking for now?
Yeah, like obviously, like the skills are like the bare bones that need to like fit the requirements of the job spec. But chances are you're going to have, say, like 10 people come to your door, and they're going to meet that job spec, and then it comes down to like the attitude, their their charisma, how much do they feel like they're going to match in with you as like a company, as a team. And again, in some cases, like you can have completely different mindsets and attitudes team by team in the company. Like whenever Chris was even talking about like the whole kind of flexible working hours, like in my team, like I work 11 to 7 because I don't like getting up early. Whereas like we had a guy working on the team who started at 7 in the morning and finished at 4. And I was like, yeah, like if you're happy working that, I don't care, as long as you're doing what you're doing. Like, we're all adults, work harder, not longer. And it's building that mindset of like, if you're passionate and you care about your work and you want to do something exciting and fun, you can have 20 master's degrees on your CV, and you could have worked in a company for 20 years, but you have to have that enthusiasm and care for it. And that doesn't stretch me like you're going to work 20-hour days and be working weekends and that kind of stuff, but having a passion that when you're on the clock, like you love it and you eat, sleep, and breathe it, when you're off the clock, you can do whatever you want, kind of thing.
That's really interesting. Just kind of thinking, leaning into there's more questions coming in about kind of working from home as recruiters. Are you seeing working from home being a perk, or do you see it as being a nice to have, a need to have? You know, what do you think working from home is going to play out going forward? So we talked about it a wee bit earlier, maybe the hybrid approach. What do you think, guys?
I think it really just depends on the company
It's hybrid.
themselves. Yeah, hybrid will most likely end up playing out. I've spoken to candidates that have young kids or have other commitments and like the flexibility that working from home affords them. But then I've also spoken to people that don't have appropriate facilities in their house and are busting to get back into the office, or even like from the younger staff's perspective, they want to have direct support from senior developers or senior members of staff, and they want the banter that an office brings, or going out on a Friday for beers or grabbing lunch and just talking rubbish in the office canteen. Like, that's sort of what attracts younger people in those sorts of careers. I think once you're established and you don't need to lean on somebody's shoulder as much, if you want to play the remote game, absolutely, that's fine if your company can get the quality and the productivity out of you. And that's what we've seen. Most companies reported back they haven't seen a dip in quality. In fact, they've seen or quantity, because they've seen people working through lunch breaks or working stupid hours to 7 o'clock or logging in at 11 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to pump out the last line of code or whatever that was sort of pissing them off and they couldn't get on a Friday. So I think there's been no complaints in terms of the productivity or the quality. And if that works for the companies and it works for the individuals that are in those companies, I think that's absolutely fine. But I've even spoken to candidates this week that joined remotely, and the company's long-term strategy was to stay remote, and they've left because they actually wanted the opportunity to eventually get back in. So that it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think it's more in the line the candidate and the developer themselves, speaking from my perspective, is the buyer. They're the one adding value to the proposition because they're the ones that are in demand. So if it works for them and it works for the company, then that's an agreement they're both going to have to settle on. But I would definitely agree a hybrid strategy is realistically, if it was a betting man, probably going to play out that way. And if there's outliers that want to do fully remote or outliers that want to do fully in the office, that will probably materialize as well.
Yeah. And there's a couple of questions and comments coming in regards to talent and working from home, and then not the talent war, but with UpSkill Enterprises and you guys working across into the US, you know, do you think that we should be worried as startups here about being able to attract talent, or do you think we've got an opportunity here in Northern Ireland?
I think there's a real opportunity. I'm just listening to some of the conversations there, and it's really interesting because I had a couple of conversations this week which shocked me a bit and was very interesting around the flexible working and working from home. I think what this last year has proven to all of us is that we can open our eyes to something different. And, you know, where we thought previously before, you know, it would be great to have people working from home, but you know, what's the system architecture like? What's the security protocols like? You know, when you're forced into a situation where you have to do it, then you start to realize the pros and the cons. And, you know, if you think about humans and human nature, you know, some people are social animals. And, you know, like even thinking about whenever I was back in school, I was never one who really went to school for the academia. You know, you sit me down in front of my computer at home, I want to cry. I need to be out in public. I need to meet people. I am a social animal. And, you know, people will respond differently depending on where they are. And you know, what I've seen from working across 3 time zones, so we have staff in Manila, we've staff in America, and we've staff here in Northern Ireland, is that technology has given us the ability and, you know, things like assessment, psychological assessments as well, to look at, you know, where people sit within their ability to work in a remote or in a kind of a social environment. We have the ability to start to look at this in a more scientific way and delve into it a wee bit. But the interesting conversation that I had this week was with an organization more close to home that I'll not name, who were talking about, whenever we were talking about hiring staff, and we were looking at a customer success. And you know, the company that I'm speaking about, you know, they generally are 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Will stop at lunchtime for an hour for their lunch, go home and have their meat and 2 veg and in bed by 10 o'clock, you know. And as a startup, we're not like that. And as an international startup, you know, we're working across the States. We need to be available all day, every day. You know yourself, you're the same as tech startups, as tech companies. And, you know, the notion, we said that we were going to bring in customer success staff in Northern Ireland, because Americans love the Irish. They love them. That's our main market, is America. And, you know, having somebody on the phone from Northern Ireland answering their calls is like a dream come true for them. And also, you know, being able to offer somebody here a job which starts at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and finishes at 10 o'clock at night for those who are night owls is more advantageous. But I couldn't get it through to this organization's head of why we would think that that would be attractive for some people. You know, the world has changed. The way we deal with work has changed. The way people work has changed. So we need to accept that and understand that. And actually, that's a real key selling point for talent coming in to startups, is the ability. Like our Manila team, they start at 12 o'clock in the afternoon and they work through till 10 o'clock at night, between 8 and 10. You know, they are living the dream because they get to lie in, they have the beers at nighttime and they're happy. So that's my 2 pence, Jenny.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think we do have quite a unique kind of talent base here, and we can attract talent to work here and work remotely with Northern Irish companies. And we were just some tweets here or some comments about Rapid7. The next roundtable recruitment's going to be in Rapid7, Chris. We hear you've been nominated to host it because your brand new offices look very nice. Tell us a bit more about your offices quickly before we finish up.
Yes, obviously Rapid7's hiring, and that's not why I'm here. Yeah, no, we recently invested in like a new custom built office in Belfast. It was a good opportunity for us to kind of like make our mark on the city. You know, build something that fitted the people we were in. Like, it's not your traditional just rows of desks, a coffee machine on one floor that never works half the time. Just trying to make it fun. Like, we've seen pictures and I kind of liken it to like, you know, a Google style office with the giant bleacher style desks and pool tables and all that kind of crap that obviously get people in the door. But it's a fun place, and it's good to see tech in Belfast changing from just cubicles and an elevator and then that's it.
Well, we look forward to seeing it when it opens up. I think we'll all be queuing out there to come and have a look. There's been some great discussions here tonight and some great questions. I guess I just wanted to kind of wrap up with maybe some final thoughts or tips. We have some startups on the call who are going to be recruiting, and as I said, we have recorded this. So if you have some final tips, guys, on kind of maybe how to recruit or keep talent or just generally within the recruitment space. Start up with the guys in the start of the call. Chris Loughlin and Chris Jones, from your experience so far, any one top tip to finish off?
Yeah, I'll king it. So I was listening to the stuff like Marty and Andrew were talking about when they were like talking about like startups and these small companies. Sell the company itself, sell the vision, sell the product, sell what the dream of the founder is. Chances are the founder is the one reading the CVs. So sell that idea, because if I'm going to work in a startup, I want to know that the person behind it is not just in this for a quick buck and they're going to dump it and leave this on else. That'll bring me in more than a salary or a fancy office or perks or working environment or anything. It's knowing that this is something that they care about and it's something that they want to solve or do for the world.
It's a good tip. Good tips all about the founder's journey. Chris Jones?
Yeah, I would say it's really important to have a clear values. I'll start again. Have clear company values and be able to stand behind that and define those to the candidates that you're talking to, and have a clear vision for what your company's value proposition is, and define what the growth trajectory is for a potential candidate. So they're coming in, show them where they are now, where they could go with the company, and bring them along that journey and make them feel part of the company.
And company values obviously ties in with the culture piece as well. Recruitment guys, if I'm a startup and I'm coming to use you guys, any tips on what I should be thinking when I'm coming to a recruiter? Because quite often maybe founders haven't done this process before.
Yeah, I would say stay away from us because we're too expensive. It's the reality of it. If it was myself taking the first step and logically trying to find people. Catalyst is fantastic for their co-founders program. If someone wants to go there as a founder and find other like-minded individuals and get cut in for equity. If you're looking at the meetups, I've been to a couple of meetups around town for the software space and just grabbing a pizza and talking to somebody and getting to know them. This guy, a young guy, Connor, I can't remember his second name, but he ended up sort of spinning something out from the Enigma meetups of guys that were coming out of Queen's University or working in software businesses around town. So networking is your friend. Ultimately, definitely what both the Chris's have touched on, making sure you know who you're looking for, making sure the value proposition for them is clear, get them either sold on the dream, sold on equity, or sold on the fact that they're going to sort of change the world. And that's the big thing I would lean upon. And if you get that person in right, they're going to add value as the business grows. There's sort of one of the clients that I would work with in town. The guy is currently the CTO, and he joined in his placement year and just stayed, which is not very common, but it's definitely possible. So making sure your value proposition is clear, who you're looking for is clear, and try and maybe the more cost-effective routes of going through sort of the entrepreneurial type meetups to meet like-minded individuals who are already thinking in that startup space, rather than someone who might be considering a bigger corporate, and then you're sort of there's no point knocking on a recruiter's door if the 5 to 10K of a fee for your senior developer might actually help you with your cash flow or with your R&D on your product or whatever. And I appreciate that's probably not very pro recruitment of me to say, but that's honestly what I would do personally.
I understand, obviously, Claire, there is sometimes a need for recruitment, particularly when you're looking for a niche role or when you're looking for something, that you maybe just don't have within your own network as well.
Yeah, look, I would echo a lot of the thoughts. If you can do it yourself, without paying an agency, do it and play to your advantages. You are, you're small, you're agile. You can probably have a speedy recruitment process where you can get people turned around quite quickly. You can have the founder involved. You can basically have advantages that the big corporates just can't have. So I would say definitely play to that. But you can partner with an agency, and if you can find an agency that you think is buying into the vision and really understands it, can really sell your opportunity to the market, it can be worth the spend. And I would say an agency might be prepared to negotiate a little bit for a startup. We certainly have. For a tech startup, we want to support local startups. It's important to the ecosystem, and we want to even more so tech for good. I mean, if I see a green tech company, I'm all over it. So, I'm prepared to offer incentives to startups, who want to work with an agency. And we've done quite a few things, offering favorable payment terms, perhaps where you don't have to pay everything in one lump sum up front. Or we've offered better rebate terms, because a lot of the startups have kind of said, we made this awful mistake right at the start and we hired, a very expensive person and we spent £10,000 on it, and they walked out after month 2 and we were left with this huge hole in our expenditure. And there's different deals you could talk about your recruiter, to make, a better refund period there, where if someone does leave in that time, you're not out all that money. Or like I say, we could spread the payment terms over a period of time, which we have done for startups as well. So they're not the big bad enemy that maybe some people think. We genuinely do not want people to be going in and having bad experience in a company, or a company having a bad experience in hiring. We want to help the ecosystem as a whole. So
yeah, I think that's being able to pick up the phone to you guys anytime has been one of the advantages. Just even to talk on behalf of our own startups, just to say, look, this is what we're thinking about, what's going on out there, and just be able to, you guys are out there in the market, what's happening. I see that as really a valuable resource. So appreciate you guys take the time out. And then kind of into the tech space and HR tech with UpSkill and ScaleUpForGrowth, these tech solutions, the HR departments and the recruitment guys are going to be using your platforms, throughout the UK and into the US, using these platforms. Do you think this is going to be the future for technology within recruitment? How do you see that going?
Yeah, I would say, sorry, I would say think outside the box a bit, and plan exactly what it is that you need before you start any recruitment drive. And a big one is don't spend a fortune, because you could always be kind of suckered into that, as the guys have said. You need to kind of plan that out. look at new ways of recruiting as well. So I know that Chris had talked about, you know, looking at Twitter and looking at different, you know, I think that Andrew had mentioned about Catalyst. You know, think outside the box a little bit. You know, it's not all black and white. The world has changed. Think about apprenticeships as well, and think about the different programs that exist to get young talent, or even those who have, you know, maybe lost their jobs with years of experience, who are re-entering back into the labour market with heaps and heaps of experience, who are taking up apprenticeships at a more mature juncture. And also remember to continually develop, upskill, and create career pathways for anybody, whether you be a small or a big company. The one thing which will keep people in your company for a long time is recognizing them, appreciating them, and showing them where they're going. Whether that's someone who doesn't even want to move, if they're happy in the job that they're at, that they know that that job is going to be there for them, and you're happy with them in that job. But if someone is showing the will and the want to be progressive within the company, show them what their career pathway is, even if that means showing them a career pathway out of your company into another one.
Yeah, that's some good feedback. There's a quick question before we jump into Kufas about kind of responsibility again around the apprenticeships. You know, the FDIs that we have here in Northern Ireland. Do you think we should try and put more emphasis on them, encouraging more graduate and apprentices to come in? I don't know a lot about the FDIs and their recruitment policies. Maybe some of the recruitment guys could answer, you know, if have any clients in that space.
I would say the elephant in the room is that they are actually targeted on hitting specific numbers of staff by Invest NI. If they've come in with the support of the Invest NI funding, that could be graduates, it could be senior hires. Typically, it's more experienced hires, and then they will build a core team and then try and hire graduates after that fact. I think typically companies will come to Northern Ireland with technical debt and work that needs done. And can you get graduates in and train them and get the work delivered in the sort of timeframes that you could with senior or experienced developers? Absolutely not. It's just the reality of it. Is it of value to the graduates to train them up and build up loyalty long term? I would say you're probably talking a more 3 to 5 year strategy on that front, but should they be responsible for it? I would say no. Honestly, from the business perspective, should they do it morally? Yeah, but it's got to work for their business model. No one wants to sort of sink their own business or their new enterprise into Northern Ireland just to look like a good guy. I think the company growing and growing legs and roots in Belfast will then automatically attract graduate talent, because that's the way things go naturally. I think I'm just hypothesizing, but I imagine when like Rapid7 first moved in, their first hires weren't graduates. They were typically sort of principal or senior engineers. They weren't.
Yeah, well, we obviously we hired like a base of like 10 like senior level people. The first year Rapid7 in Belfast, they hired 20 interns.
Okay, fair play.
And they were like, we want, like, because they knew very much the model in Northern Ireland, and like University of Ulster and Queen's, like everyone does a placement year. You have to get a placement or you're never going to get a job. That shouldn't be the case, but it is. Yeah. So they were like, right, we're going to hire 20 interns. Those interns actually turned out to be one of the best developers I know. They've all like gone off and done their own things now.
Yeah.
But year on year, we're up to 30 at the minute. We're looking to bring in 35 next year. We've already accepted 30 of those offers for next summer. So year on year, we're pushing it. And the funny thing is, like, this isn't like Rapid7 Northern Ireland. That is the heavy driving force. Like, we love it, we want to do it. But it's the Boston headquarters are like, hire more interns. They don't have as the intern thing over there like we do. Like they have their like different, they call them like whatever, but it's not as focused as like we do. They're pumping as much. Like we want to grow and grow to the point where like potentially we could have 40 interns a year coming through the doors, bringing them back as grads. Because the thing is, you can hire all the seniors in Belfast, and you have all the seniors in Belfast. When then they get old and want to retire, what are you going to do? Yeah. You need to keep that churn come through. You need to invest in the community. So we're even going as level as like going to primary schools and like targeting the STEM groups to say like, you know, we want you in 10 years because no, we're going to invest in your future now. We want to get you into tech and get you excited.
Well, I picked a terrible example then, because that's absolutely exemplary. Hats off to you guys, because that's not standard fare.
But yeah, like, and that's like, so Chris, you had raised the question, like.
Yeah, I think that's why I feel it should be the American companies coming in. Yeah. They're worth billions of dollars. They have the money, they have the resources, and Invest and I are funding them to the hilt. Like, you're talking several £million for companies coming in then essentially decimate the senior hiring market with zero social responsibility and actually building graduates from the startup. And I think it is a bit of a pipe dream that startups can hire apprentices at early stages. You need those key hires initially to be able to build that core technical competency. Maybe only when you get to 15, 20 people can you afford to bring in 5, 10 graduates and spend the time. And that's why if Invest and I are funding, if they're coming in off their own back, do what they want. But if Invest and I are funding them with millions of taxpayer dollars and pounds, then why should, I think they have a social responsibility to be in the universities, to be in primary schools, and to take in X amount of graduates for any senior employee that they bring in. Because I'm sure most of the Invest and I money probably goes to you guys in recruitment. It probably does. If they're hiring 15 people at 10K a pop and using you guys at higher commission than others, then a lot of that money is going straight to you to bring those people in at much lower salaries than what they would pay in the States. So they're actually saving tons of money by coming over here to build that technical debt. So I do feel there should be a moral responsibility that Invest and I should put on them. Obviously, that's not for us to decide. I strongly feel that's something they should be doing.
I would agree. I would agree on the front of they definitely need to create graduate opportunities there. It's got to fulfill the whole ecosystem. Otherwise, you're just coming in poaching talent, and then the next person that comes in with 10K more in the base salary is going to poach that talent again, and then it keeps them away from the locally established businesses or the ones that are a bit more longer term, have pre-existing salary structures and can't afford to get into that game. I would absolutely agree on that front. I'm not going to start to defend all recruiters, not at this time on a Thursday night, but yeah, it's definitely something they should consider.
It's been a really good question there from Michael in terms of the interns, using the talent, maybe, and not even necessarily the interns, but some of your talent in the bigger companies might have a wee bit of spare time. Can they spare, an hour, half a day, or a full day to help startups? Is that part of your career development? Is it part of your professional development you're learning within the bigger corporates? Is that something you would consider? Because obviously startups are always looking for a wee bit of help. I don't know if that's a question maybe more for Rapid7 or Michael, who was it for?
I just love the awkward silence. That's what I like the best about that.
I can't comment.
The thing that has to be sort of recognized is that a designer, a pretty junior designer, can go into a startup and do an incredible amount of work relatively easy. And it's those really specific skills that are often lacking and can have the biggest impact. And if Invest and I are paying their salary for the big boy, maybe they should come and help the other ones around the corner. So my biggest frustration is that this is the stuff we should be talking about in the Duke of York about 10 minutes time. Like that is. Today we had a session at lunchtime, which should have been a really nice lunch and a bit of a chat around table about similar stuff to this. Then we should have had an afternoon's work, then gone to the Duke for a pint to warm up before this, come in here, done this with pizzas, and then back to the Duke of York. And I would have come home about 12:30, slightly pissed, but feeling like I'd achieved something today. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. That's all I've been thinking for the last minutes or so.
Well, the reality is, Michael, with that speech that you just did there, I was hoping to get a bottle of wine in Tesco before I go home, but I see it's 4 minutes to 8 now. So thanks for that.
No, thank you so much, everybody.
I'll get one here for you, Stephen. You can come down. I'll give you one.
Right across the road. I'll be over in a minute.
One. Kevin's got plenty there.
Yeah, I'll say your virtual one.
Kufa, I apologize. I cut across you earlier as well. You were about to jump in there. I know Danny had asked you a question there, and I apologize.
You basically read my mind. You said everything I was going to say. So listen, happy days. And I want to say to Rapid7, that is exactly what everyone should be doing. That's the brave way to go about it. It takes commitment, it takes effort, it takes time. And I'm sure they've made many mistakes, but that's what we need to do. It's kind of be brave in kind of trying to find the talent that you need, and go against the norm. Don't do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, like we're not alone. There's other companies. Like I was at NIDEM Conf a couple years ago when I was talking to a guy on the after party, and he was like, "Oh, who do you work for?" I was like, "Oh, Rapid7." He's like, "American company again." He's like, "Fuck you." I'm like, "Why?" He's like, I can't afford to pay developers because your company came in and paid developers, out of the market." I'm like, well, I'm obviously not going to complain because I'm getting paid out of the market. So like, I'm getting paid well. But yeah, it's like, it sucks. The market is balancing out. American companies are always going to come in. Yeah, the problem here, like I don't know enough about the whole invest in I and where they put their money, but it seems like it's not going into the right places. It seems like startups are getting screwed over. I do know a lot of people have actually left Rapid7 and now work in startups that are completely Northern Ireland based startups that are going out, getting funding, doing amazing things. And like I've contemplated before going and joining them. So like times are changing, things are gonna change. Like because the market is flooded with companies come from every different country other than Northern Ireland, doesn't always mean it's gonna be the killer.
Chris, do you think that's the thing where people have to graduates will go and get trained and work within an investment or large organizations, and then they'll get to the level of they want a bit more variety. They don't want to be part of a bigger machine. They want that flexibility. And if that can happen before they get stuck with big mortgages and children to pay for, if at that inflection point before life's responsibilities come too heavy, they can jump into a startup and realize that dream. And then, this can all happen so quickly with tech. You can be brilliant by the time you're 22, 23. And then create that startup vision by the time you're 30 and retired, 40. Like
31.
I think it's like you come into university and you're like, well, who am I going to work for? The company that has an ad on my LinkedIn feed or an ad on my Facebook feed, or this company I've never heard of. I've paying 700 quid a month in rent in the center of Belfast, and what am I going to do? It's that security factor. I think what'll usually happen is they'll work 1 or 2 years in a big name company, get to the point then when like everyone hits 3 years, I'm like, right, I'm not getting treated the way I want to be, I'm going to move. And then by that point, they've talked to enough people who've been around the cycle. And the annoying thing is then it's a small cycle of people who all know everyone who's worked in every other company, and they can tell you, don't go there, that's shit, and I'll go there, they're doing really well. And then they'll go and they'll take a chance on the startup because they believe in that person who might have worked in a big name company and left to go start their brand new idea. And it's getting that point of it.
One thing I would say as well is like the whole FDI, it's the culture's being demonized. They've come in and they've, stolen, all the people, but they've actually created quite a risk-free culture in a way, because, now people can leave a well-paid job in a corporate and take a chance in a startup, knowing that there's a massive safety net there, that they can walk straight back into 5 other companies, without any hassle whatsoever. So conversely, it's actually helped, I think, a little bit, where people are prepared to just take a chance for a year or two and see if it works.
Claire, I said that to one of our Raise founders this week, that she's sitting on her first hire and she was a bit nervous about it. And I was saying, like, don't worry about it. He's big enough and ugly enough to make his own mistakes. And there are no unemployed developers in Belfast or Northern Ireland. But don't worry about it. Bring him in, get what you can, and you'll work and you'll flourish and you'll do really, really well. But if it doesn't work, don't worry about him. He'll be fine. He will be fine. And yeah, see, Northern Irish people, Kufa, just so you know this, we're the most risk-averse people. Well, culturally, we're quite a risk-averse. I'm probably a little bit older than everyone. So my parents' generation, you get a job in the civil service, a teacher, a lawyer, accountant, and you get a good job and a good pension, and you do nothing which is risky. And that is, we have this risk-averse culture, but I'm hoping it's changing. I'm hoping you guys who are 10, 15 years younger than me are now seeing a change, and risk isn't as big a thing as it used to be, and people are having the balls to go out and do something exciting. That's
I don't know, Michael, because I would see this as kind of a wee bit different, and maybe Anne can chirp in here. But I mean, my first kind of big hire was an American from Texas, and one of the big draws, I suppose, of us is just the culture of how we do things. And I don't know whether that's something that UpSkill push out, but I would like to think it's not. That in Northern Ireland we're a bit you know, we're a bit ballsy, we'll punch above our weight a wee bit. And you know, maybe I don't know whether Anne's feeling brave enough if she wants to come on and say anything around that, or she'll kill me for bringing her into this.
No, I would agree with you that definitely you're not risk adverse for sure. I'll say that. And that whole culture is so very different from American government, quasi-government, and for-profit agencies, that's one of the things that attracted me, was the flexibility, the culture of the people, being able to go over there and meet everyone. But I definitely think that there's a lot of people who would like to work for a different kind of company. And I think the Northern Ireland companies offer that. They just offer a different feel to how they treat people, how they value people, how, as Stephen said, they develop and want to keep you and retain you. And I think that's very different from the churn and burn that occurs a lot in the US.
There's really good insights, and I think there's a lot of value that we can take away from those. So thank you very much, Anne. Some of the stuff that we are working on at Raise is in among the digital skills piece. Matt's left the call, but you may know Matt Johnson from Digital Circle Days, and looking to try and rejuvenate that, particularly highlighting the need for more development and more focus on the skills, particularly looking at the lobbying piece. I know we've talked a lot tonight about the FDI and trying to create a collaboration with small businesses, large businesses within the digital sector that we can have. It would sit beside Raise essentially as nearly like a CSE, is that what you call it, or a social enterprise type model, to represent the sector again, to try and have a voice, because we have seen that there maybe hasn't been such a collaborative voice, particularly over the last year in the digital sector. So it is something we are looking to try and reinvigorate and redevelop. So if there's anybody on the call that wants to be part of that, be happy to have a chat. We're just starting to pull things together on that at the moment and trying to get the right steer on that. So be happy to have a chat with anybody on that going forward. So keep in touch on that. And yeah, we run these monthly get-togethers. Be happy to run another one once Rapid 7 opens up in person. That would be great. But quite often they're different topics. We've had one on UX, we've had one on community, we've had one on no code, mental health. We've had lots of variety of topics. So if you have any topics that you want to be fleshed out and discussed, you know, from the likes of your development teams or software developers, we're always looking for new topics to chat about. So be happy to have any inputs on that. So yeah, lots happening over here, and really appreciate your guys' time taking it out to have a chat tonight. So big thank you to everybody, and hopefully you find it all useful and take something away. And yeah, as David rightly pointed out, we've a wee survey running for Digital Circle just at the moment to just try and get feedback of what people really want from that. That's how we can improve and develop that kind of digital community. And we have a prize if anybody enters the survey of a 6-pack of Bill House beer. So who couldn't want to enter that? So thanks very much, guys, for your time. Again, really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening, everybody.
That's fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for the input. It was amazing. Thank you.
Michael, I'm on my way over for that bottle of wine. Cheers, mate. Thanks.